We didn't intend to start a book publishing company. It was 2007, and we were still in high school, and our thought process was like, what could we build using the tools that we have to, frankly, make a bit of pocket money as high school kids? You don't necessarily need to have read a Marty Kagan book in order to be a good PM. You need to have strong skills in reasoning and logic and bringing evidence and then making a decision that math helps you train.
Hello, my name is Toomas and I am your today's host. I had the pleasure to talk with Lars. We talked about a lot of different topics, as you can hear from the two intro clips. I hope you really enjoyed today's show. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to us at tpg.de. Hello everybody. Today we have Lars Trunin from Wise with us. As there is a saying that working 1 year in a startup feels like working 3 in a regular company. So Lars, how does it feel like to work in Wise for 30 years?
Yeah, you're right in saying that it does sometimes feel like you've been there for quite a while. But boy, what a ride it has been. So for context, like it's going to be 10 years in April next year when I first joined Wise, and in that time I've only done one job effectively. I've only been a PM, but I've had the privilege to be a PM in one of the coolest startups in the world, one of the fastest growing, and one of the impactful ones, right? And in that time, I've had the chance to be deep at the heart, building some of the core payments functionality. From that all the way to spending time with our regulators, lawmakers, central banks, boards, etc., to figure out, okay, how do we actually build a global, scalable money movement machine?
How did you end up in Wise? How did you get there?
Yeah, it was it was about 10 years ago when I finished my MBA, my Master's in Business Administration at Oxford, and before that, I was running my own little book publishing company that we started in 2007, and I came back from Oxford to Estonia, and at first I thought, okay, I want to continue down the book publishing business, but after I wrote my last book, Valamid, which is about math, chemistry, and physics formulas for high school kids, I realized that even though the book did very well, I was a bit done with books. I wanted to do something different, and I wanted to be I wanted to work on a product that I would use myself. I wanted to be surrounded by people that inspire me, and I wanted to make sure that I get to make decisions rather than following someone else's decisions blindly. And a good friend of mine worked at this little startup in Tallinn called TransferWise. Now, I was already a customer of the company at the time. I was among the first 35,000 customers there ever were, but I didn't realize what was the culture? How does it actually get built? And I got very interested in it. And because my friend is a super inspiring, high energy, super smart person, I thought, okay, he must be surrounded by other people like that. So I want to be surrounded by people like my friend. And that's how I decided to apply for a job, for a product job. And admittedly, at the time, I didn't actually know what product people do. So I just read the description. I was like, yeah, I think I'd enjoy doing this. And so I went ahead and applied.
Well, product in like 10 years ago most likely was totally different thing than it is today because of all of the you have the Marty Kagan, who has been talking quite a lot about how to define product and to define the product culture. You have other players from the US and the Silicon Valley. How has in Wise how do you define product?
Yeah, so I think interestingly, at Wise it hasn't actually changed as much as it has, for example, in the general community and product among product people in Estonia. The reason is already at the time when I joined, the folks who were leading product had a fundamentally different understanding, the sort of modern understanding of how to build product today. And now I've heard the name Marty Kagan, but I've admittedly never read any of his books. I've never watched any of his things. Um, I don't think I've met him, although I'd love to. But what's sort of fundamental about the way how we build product is that um, we make our decisions using effectively the scientific method, which has been around for hundreds of years as opposed to the last 10 years. And if you make your decisions using that, you all of a sudden realize that you're starting to speak the language of the universe. You don't necessarily need modern lingo, modern frameworks, fancy boxes and arrows in order to build a good product. You can go back to the fundamental questions. And Wise already used that mentality 10 years ago. And we still do it today. We do it at a much larger scale than at the time. However, the principles have still remained the same.
It's actually it it shows how strong the product culture is. If for the rest of us, we have to look up to people like Marty and Elena, Verna, and those people who defined for the ones who don't have the product leadership available. This means that the leadership in product leadership in Wise has been so strong. If you've not had the chance to read those books even, which is amazing in essence, and still going strong, and as far as I've understood, one of the strongest product people in the market come from Wise. So that's really cool. What are the biggest things you're tackling at the moment in your work life?
Yeah, so as I said earlier, like we're building the global money machine effectively, and one of the challenges is how do you make um, that machine solve customer problems? And when we've spoken to our customers, they've told us that they have a couple of problems that we really should be solving for them. One is like they want payments to always be instant, no matter where they send their money. They want the payments to be as cheap as possible, ideally free. They want full transparency so they could always make the best decision for themselves, and they want it to be very convenient. And in most countries where Wise operates today, the way we operate is that we are a customer of a local bank. But the way how money actually moves between banks is that the banks use what's called a payment system between themselves. So imagine like a box in the middle, the banks connect to, two banks would connect to that box, and then through that box, they would exchange money between themselves. Now, the reality is that in most countries, in order for you to get access to that box, you have to be a bank, except in an increasing number of countries that have decided that you don't have to be a bank anymore. The UK was the first one. They changed the law in 2017. And I had a really, really cool opportunity to lead the team at the time at Wise to be the first payments company rather than a bank in the world to get connected to that black box in the middle of the payment system. And in April 2018, we did that. And it's actually a pretty incredible feeling when at the end of the project, the results are broadcasted in the Financial Times, in Reuters, and you have to change a Wikipedia page to reflect what you just did. And the result of that was actually groundbreaking and world changing, because after that, the doors opened for Hungary for us to do it there, for Singapore, for Australia. And I don't know if you saw the news last week, but we just announced that the Japanese payment system has given us a green light to do that at the end of 2025. And so what this means is that Wise would be able to connect to all these payment systems directly around the world, as opposed to relying on a third party, which adds time, complexity, cost, and all these other bits that our customers really don't want to take on as a burden when they move money. But if all of these are now available to us, the reality is that there aren't that many institutions who have built direct connectivity to multiple payment systems around the world directly, let alone dozens of them, right? So we're probably going to be among the largest of its kind. And how do you build that, entire system at scale? What kind of organization do you build around this? What kind of controls do you build it in a way that allows you to move fast and innovate on it, while at the same time making sure that it's robust and secure, and we're able to pass all the tests and be very, very good at the audits that we have to go through, etc. So that sort of challenge of like, how do you build something of a real globally functioning machine at scale is something that I spend a lot of my time thinking about today.
How does it me as a little bit who is not part of fintech world, how can you explain a little bit about what's the difference between the Swift and then having the payment box, and what's the essence there, and how does it relate? Will you replace Swift because you are now available in 6 of the 7 biggest markets, or what's the...
So what most people don't know, and rightfully so, they shouldn't know this, is that Swift actually is not a payment method. Swift is just a messaging service that banks use to talk to each other in a formal way. So kind of like sending a WhatsApp message. So it just so happens that the banks have collectively agreed to use Swift to exchange payment messages between each other. But the way how the money actually moves is kind of like, imagine a group of friends on Facebook. So if I want to send money to a friend of yours who is not a friend of mine, there's a message I can send to your friend directly, but the money actually needs to go from me to you and from you to your friend. And you can chain up these friends, if you will, one at a time. And they can be pretty long. And what I just described to you is the basics of what they call correspondent banking, right? So it goes from one to another, to another, to another. And there are two things that are broken with that correspondent banking setup. Number one is that even though it's a very large network consisting of more than like 10,000 banks, which is pretty cool, they're not all connected to each other, right? So they're connected to each other through someone, but it means everyone wants a piece of the pie if they're being used to exchange payments. In other words, if you are now between me and your friend, you want a slice of that. And the second part of it is like the customer, so my customer in this instance, who wants to send money does not actually know how much you're going to take and how much your friend is going to take. And so that creates this layer of opacity that adds speed, adds time, reduces speed, adds cost and uncertainty to the entire system. Swift itself is brilliant because all the banks are connected to it. However, ultimately, the mechanism by which Swift is being used to exchange money internationally makes it slow and expensive the way how we know it today, and opaque. When Wise is finished with its global money moving machine, you would expect all of these middle layers to be bypassed. Money would move as, down the shortest possible path, instantly, and with the lowest
one
possible
middle
cost.
player, and it's going to be Wise, right?
Well, you would hope so, right?
There's this joke that through 3 people you know any person in the world, or something like that. So you potentially could get the phone number of, I don't know, Barack Obama if you would want it, because you know somebody who knows somebody and they know Barack. So that's the essence of correspondent banks and Swift. Yeah,
That is, and it's like news travel back in the 1600s, like when a person from one village to another went and traveled and broadcasted news, right? But today, like, people want Google. Everyone wants to kind of have as direct of an access to the source as possible. And what we're really sort of, if you take the analogy, what we're really helping to build here is the Google for money, such that you could get access to the direct payment systems no matter where you are.
Let's let's move on to you. You mentioned when you said that you launched a publishing company, and you did a couple of mathematics and chemistry books. What? Why mathematics? Why is it important to? One thing is you had a publishing company, but at the same time you did math books, not, I don't know, novels and stories. What's the idea there?
So when we started we didn't intend to start a book publishing company. It was 2007, and we were still in high school, and our thought process was like, what could we build using tools that we have to frankly make a bit of pocket money as high school kids? And I realized at the time, I was in the 10th grade, that I was helping quite a few of my friends pass the ninth grade exam. And I think the reason why they turned to me um, over and over again was because I had a good result. I got the maximum points in the ninth grade exam, and I felt pretty comfortable with math. But also one of the sort of key bits was that I had really good sort of my own notes that I took from class um, on math. So I thought, if I productize my own notes into a little book, maybe others would find it helpful as well. And fast forwarded, like, we did that for the ninth grade. We did it for the 10th, the 11th, the 12th. We did it in other topics like chemistry and physics, because we felt like we had some sort of an edge. And and the early success of the first book showed that there's a need and demand for them. So in other words, like, we felt like we were pretty good at that, good at math. So we wanted others to be good at math too.
I understand today all of the books are sold out, and the publishing company is not any longer publishing the books. Are
Yeah, that's right. So earlier this year, the last of the math books was sold, but actually, like, throughout the years, we did pretty well. Like, we reached about 50,000 kids in Estonia, which is a very large proportion of the population. I still get people come up to me even in Hawaii saying, like, "Hey, are you the author of those books?" I'm like, "Yes, I am." It's like, "Oh, like, I passed my math exam thanks to that book," and to this day, like, it really warms my heart. But it was only after I had spent a number of years at Wise that I realized the power and value of having a strong foundation in math, not to kind of solve very specific sort of technical problems with integrals, but on a more fundamental level, um, how people use logic and math, the language of our universe, to make decisions. And in that context, I started to kind of see how, you don't necessarily need to have read a Marty Kagan book in order to be a good PM. You need to have strong skills in reasoning and logic and bringing evidence and then making a decision that math helps you train.
it's the numbers of how many people who purchased the book and read the book, 50,000. Just for the audience to understand, in Estonia, textbooks are given by the school for free, so you can rent them for free. So if somebody actually decided to buy the books, it's very impressive. Really really good job that 50,000 people hopefully have a uh, better relationship with math thanks to that. Um, just to jump a little bit back once more, you said that you had your notes on the math. how did it look like? Did you create some mind maps of how to solve the things, or what's the essence of the good note taking?
So I think I realized quite early that despite the fact that those textbooks are free, uh, the kids don't actually read them. I mean, they sometimes might be forced to read them, but they don't generally pick them up. And the reason why they don't is because they're big and bulky and contain a lot of information, but not in a way that kids actually need. Oftentimes, what they need is like, I have a test coming up, or I have an exam coming up on this topic, and I have like the attention span to maybe read a page, maybe a page and a half on this. And I want to get the most important things, the sort of five things I can remember, how to use it, and that's it. I don't want to read about the horses and the apples and everything that's around it. I just want my formula. I just want my rule. I just want a quick application, and I'm done, right? And that was kind of the essence of those notes, is that effectively I cut out all the fluff and I left only the absolute bare essentials. Now, that the book that we published as a standalone, it would not work, right? Because for you to kind of pick up the book and start to learn math from scratch, it's too bare bones, right? You need that context. You need the horses and the apples to illustrate everything. But as a reference book, for you to go back to when you've already gone through the materials, when you've already gone through it with your teachers, to just get the absolute most important bits really quickly, so you wouldn't forget them, or so you could find them easily. That's where the book came in. And we learned that there are two major groups who used this. One was the folks who were preparing for tests and exams, who just wanted a quick reference material so they wouldn't have to go back and forth and find the important information from the thick books. That was group number one. And group number two was a group of people who had graduated from high school and that were now heading into university, started taking their linear algebra and physics classes. And all of a sudden, they're faced with, these trigonometry rules that I had to go through in high school, but I've now forgotten about it. Some of them went to supplementary classes. Some of them may have bought books, that the old textbooks. Most didn't. Most struggled and suffered, and the ones who had the book that we published were able to reuse it over and over again after they had graduated from high school. They didn't have to go to a high school library. They didn't have to spend 50 to 100 euros to buy all the books. They just had one math book where they had everything that they needed. And so, in other words, it was about truly understanding what was the real problem that those people had, removing everything and just keeping only the bare essentials, making the book thin, and that seemed to work.
The essence of product management, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, as I said, like when I applied to WISE, I wasn't sure what product management is. However, I had spent 8 years at that time talking to students, trying to really understand what is it that they need. The iteration cycle was slow, right? Because you have to print, you have to let them use it for weeks and weeks and weeks, and only then you get feedback. But even more so, you have to listen to that feedback and iterate on it, like in drastic manners rather than incremental manners. And you're right, like the essence is product management. I never used tech to do it. The first version we wrote was in a Microsoft Word on I think it was Windows Vista that we used at the time. Like it was like as low tech as you can possibly imagine, right? But the product was a physical thing you could hold in your hand with the information that you need to solve your problem, right? And that's the essence of it, not the tech underneath it.
Going to WISE with all of the learnings of how to take notes and make it digestible and edible. How did it work out in a product management line when you outlined the products for? Did it help others understand what you're trying to achieve and do? How did you use it? What's your thoughts on that?
Mm-hmm. So a lot of the principles of not getting mesmerized by various frameworks and rules and random structures, but instead going and talking to real people, watching how they actually use it, and then taking a step back and thinking what is sort of the fundamental way how to best solve that problem is directly translatable. What I had to learn when I came to Wise, which I hadn't appreciated when I was running the publishing company, was that in the publishing company and with math, I could rely on my own intuition a lot because I had been the customer once. I had not known this information. I had come to learn this information and then to use it myself in the exact same settings as the customers would. However, at Wise, the way how people move money, for example, is not necessarily the way how I move money, right? We have customers who may have an urgent need to send money from London to Australia. We have customers who have moved more money than I have ever seen, right? And and in that context, you need to be able to take a step back and put yourself in the other person's shoes and really try to empathize with how does their world work? What do they expect? And how do you now translate their world into the product that you're building? And that was probably one of the hardest things for me to do. It's like, how do you make yourself less important and the customer more important, where you like it isn't a one-to-one match. But over time, once you start making mistakes around the fact that you have uh, used yourself as the template, your own view of the world, had a bias in a product decision, and then you realize actually this is not how the world works. Only to roll back, really go and try to understand the customer, and then build something that isn't intuitive for you, only to find that actually once you really did learn it, what they really need, and you build exactly what they're asking for, that's when the world changes, and when you start building incredible products.
How do you do self-reflection and understand where you are lacking, like the basic understanding or the fundamental understandings of doing something, and then go go and learn the basics rather than trying to do all of the advanced stuff right from the get-go?
Yes. Okay. So for me to try to answer that question, um, uh, a bit to talk through is what makes a good PM to begin with, and how does one become better? Because that's what all of us strive for. How do you become the best PM in the world? And I think the best PMs in the world are the people who consistently make quality decisions um, at pace and at scale. And I've learned that initially in the first years of being a PM, it's all about getting the foundations right. How do you use data? How do you talk to customers? How do you overcome challenges? How do you avoid boiling the ocean? Like there's a large number of like very basic things you need to get right. But over time, um, as you start solving bigger and bigger problems, and as you start leading other PMs who are going to start solving those problems with your guidance and later on their own, um, you need to start asking yourself questions like, what fundamental qualities are going to help you make the best possible decisions? And I found that there are um, three sort of tracks that PMs tend to take in order to make quality decisions as they grow. One is they become domain experts in their area. So you might become a domain expert in a very specific niche. Like, for example, you become a super expert in Korean payments, right? There's no person on earth who's better than you at understanding Korean payments and how to optimize it. Now, on one end, it is pretty cool for you to be that kind of an expert, and you can build on top of it for quite a while. But the challenge of being an expert in a domain and relying only on that is that it takes a very long time for you to become an expert. And whilst you can leverage this expertise in a single field, it's quite hard for you to transition to another one. Let's say to become all of a sudden an expert on card payments in Brazil. The second bit, the second sort of track is sort of a halfway house track, which is that you have learned a little bit about the frameworks out there. They could be from the schools of McKinsey and BCG, or the schools of um, sort of superstar PMs. You learn 10, 12 frameworks, the Anzoff matrix for growth, and a few others, build, measure, learn, if you want, if you will. And then all of a sudden, like, you start to apply them in various situations. And on one end, like in many cases, like those tools can help you shortcut to the answer quite quickly, especially if the problems are pretty simple. So they're kind of like from an engineering world, like they're the equivalents of being able to write "Hello World" in like 10 different environments. But as soon as problems get more complex and where they don't fall into that category anymore, their risk is that people are going to start to overfit the tool to the problem. So they're going to start seeing every problem as a nail to hit with the hammer that they've learned how to use. And the characteristic of this is that you start to grow initially from like the early stages to sort of a middle level PM. So let's talk about senior PM. But at some point, like if they only rely on those tools um, without going into the fundamental first principles, they get stuck and they don't understand why. They are unable to convince other people to come along with them on the journey. Their decisions are not yielding effective and valuable results, and they're unable to handle large degrees of complexity. And this is where the third track kind of comes to play, which is the hardest to build up, is like where you really need to have that STEM foundation of math, engineering, science, chemistry, whatever it is. Could also be economics, but one where you have to uh, have gone through solving thousands, if not tens of thousands of tiny problems, where you look at the resources that you have, what's the information that you have, you look at the destination where you need to get to, and you work your way backwards towards a solution that is actually going to get you there, execute on it, and test whether the result actually, is consistent with everything that you've built up. That is really hard to build because it takes tenacity and grit over many years to go through this. However, it is also the most rewarding because it means you're going to be the most versatile PM out there. You can employ the same ideas and same fundamental approaches to solving problems, from solving UX problems to going deep into infrastructure to figuring out how you calculate foreign exchange exposure in real time to challenging an argument with the regulators or lawmakers. The fundamental logic is the same because that's the language of our universe, but it takes the longest time to master. So if I go back to your question now of how do I self-reflect and what path do I choose and where do I kind of get better, uh, for my own skills of executing, I try to lean to the last one, is like, where do I lack the fundamental ability to reason, um, and how do I find the shortest paths to the end solution? How do I define the end goal as clearly as possible? How do I really uncover what resources do I have available in order to go and solve this problem? And then for the people that I lead, it's a question of figuring out what is the right path for that particular person at any given point. Because for some people, that last bit is very easy, right? So they have the foundation, they have a STEM degree from the best universities in the world, they've been an engineer, and all you need to do is expose them to the real world complexities where they can use the skills that they've built over the years to solve problems. But some of the PMs might not have gone through that journey. How do you help them? And if I go to a fresh PM and I say, look, I'm afraid you have to go and do a science degree for the next 5 years and then you should come back. That's a most definitely wasteful, but also super demotivating, right? But at the same time, like having them be stuck in like one of those tracks it becomes pretty evident for them that they're going to get stuck at some point. So how do you slowly transition them from one to the other to the other is something that I continuously think about. Um, I continuously iterate, try to see what works, what doesn't. Sometimes people get lit up by this and they say, "Oh, like this is super awesome," and sometimes they get stuck. And how do you then get the person unstuck? Which exercises do you recommend to them? Do you recommend them to now read a Marty Kagan book? Do you recommend them to go through consulting exercises? Do you recommend them to learn Python? Or do you say, actually, you know what? That's probably not going to be the fastest track for you. You should probably actually double down on the domain expertise and go and leverage that in order to have the best impact that you can. So, in other words, like it's in that frame that I try to think like both how do I develop as a PM, but also how do I help others develop as PMs as a product lead.
Do you see product managers mostly as generalist type of? You mentioned that there is you could go into a very domain specific expertise kind of PM, but in essence, do you see product management as a very wide angled profession, or is it something which is more related to should be more related to tech or design or business or and then to understand what are the like the fundamentals and learn your way up from there?
I think it very much depends on the company that a PM is in because every company defines product management in a different way. I think it's certainly true that the smaller the company, the more general PM set of skills need to be, which means that they need to be able to jump from solving a front end problem to helping a compliance officer build a business plan for a license application. And as a company grows, you have a need for both. You have a need for both general set of skills as well as for highly specific set of skills. I'll give an example. Like Wise, for example, has um, PMs who are really, really good at building anti-money laundering machine learning algorithms, right? Probably you will never find a course on this in a university, right? But it is incredibly useful to have that kind of expertise in that particular company. Um, I think it's also true to say that the more you start to lead other people, the more flexible you need to be able to be in your skill set, right? So, and the higher you go, like the best PMs or the best product leads are the ones who are able to go into detail with every topic. They don't have to go into detail, but they need to be able to go into detail with every topic. And so, in that sense, like if I kind of go back into the history of product management at Wise, we didn't have a PM on day one, but we did have engineers on day one, and it's ultimately the engineers who build and build the product, who write the code. And at some point, the sort of engineering adjacent decisions that need to be made in a team, they start taking so much time, like talking to customers, talking to regulators, etc., that you need a dedicated person for this. And that was kind of the point where the need became so big that Wise hired its first PM. And to a large degree, that's still true at Wise today, right? Ultimately, it is the engineers who build the code, build and write the code, and then PMs support them with this. In another company, that might be the opposite, right? It starts with the PM. They might design everything, and only then the engineers will come. Which one is right? Like it depends on the problem, it depends on the culture, and so on and so forth. That like you can, but both can be very valid. But in our case, like uh, ultimately how general or how specific a PM should be depends on problem that the engineer is trying to solve with code. It can be general, it can be very specific.
It's the, it all comes down to what is the problem that we are solving here. So
Absolutely. The solution is irrelevant in the grand scheme of things if it doesn't address the underlying problem, right? But we all know this already. So
how would you avoid copycatting all of the yeah, as a so the first was the domain expert. Second was that you learn actually 10, 12, 15 frameworks and then you start applying them. How do you avoid copycatting and learning your own way of so getting to the third and the holy grail of holy grail solution, so to say?
yeah, I think the secret sauce is that you actually have to listen to what your customers are saying. Um, the the bit that I've learned over my years is that your customers are your most valuable resource in the company, and but you need to learn how to use their insights. The bit that I use the most is our Net Promoter Score feedback. We we measure the score. The score itself, a number, is like frankly not that useful. How it trends over time is a bit more useful, but the comments that customers leave with the Net Promoter Score surveys are invaluable. And what's interesting is that when you measure the comments that come with the score 0 to 6, they usually tell you what's wrong with the product, and the comments that come with 9 and 10, they tell you what's right with the product, and you need to be able to use both. And the 0 to 6s, if you if you listen to those customers and solve exactly the problem that they're asking you to solve, not remotely solving it, but exactly solving it, then you have a high chance of actually addressing it. And I'll give a practical example. When we built the Wise account a number of years ago, we realized by reading NPS comments that our customers want to earn a return on the money that they hold with Wise. Already at the time, like they held billions of pounds of cash with us, and they wanted to make sure that when the money is just sitting there, the money is actually doing something useful that is earning them a return. Now, how do you do this? Well, the traditional way is like you become a bank, and then you take deposits, you lend it out, and you bank the difference, and you pay interest to the customers, right? And that's what many institutions have done, even in the last 10 years. Another option that some have attempted is like, okay, you go and build a trading platform within the financial services application, allowing you to buy and sell, I don't know, stocks, ETFs, whatever it might be. And those are sort of commonly available solutions out there, and it would have been very, very easy for Wise to copy them. But we didn't do this. We really started to think, what is the customer really asking? The customer is asking not for a trading platform, not for a bank, not for lending. They're asking for their money to earn a return. And so by going back to the fundamental principles, we spent a good amount of time thinking, okay, like what other ways are there to do this? And what are the qualities that we want this product to have? And one of them, for example, was that the customer doesn't want to actively make a decision every time they put money on the account. They just want it to happen in the background. It's number one. And number two, they want full transparency of what is actually happening with the money. If you're putting your money into a bank, do you actually know where your bank is lending your money in order to earn the money to give you that return? I bet 9 people out of 10 have no clue, right? So that was kind of the essence that we wanted to address. And the solution we came up with was what we now call the Wise Assets product, which allows you to flick a switch on a balance. And as a result of that, all of your money on that balance get invested to, based on what you decide, either the MSCI World Index Fund, which is an index fund representing the largest companies in the world, or a money market fund representing the government bonds of the largest countries in Europe. The first one is potential high yield, however, bigger risk. The second one is lower yield, lower risk. In both cases, your capital is risk. But what was cool is that we've now built something that no one else had built before. This one click investment into a fund didn't exist. And today, if we launched the product a couple of years ago in the UK, a year and a half ago in Europe. Our customers are already holding 3.5 billion euros with Wise, and and this is a testament to us having actually solved the customer problem that they asked. Even though a solution like this had not existed before, it's unorthodox and not copycatting it. And the other bit about this, I mentioned sort of the 0 to 6s in NPS, but there's also the 9s and the 10s. And why they're valuable is not necessarily to build a better product, although you can sometimes get some good insights there. It's the language that the customers use to give you that score that can tell you how you market the product, right? So the words that they use to describe what made them happy about that product are exactly the words that you should be using to describe the product to other customers who have not yet used you. Because today, 2 customers out of 3 who join Wise come through word of mouth. And the way how they come is by us deliberately making it easier for customers to recommend Wise to their friends, because we've listened to the words they use to describe Wise and played them back exactly as they are. And again, like, we're not copying anyone else's marketing strategy. We're not copying anyone else's designs. We're just going to the customers, really listening to what they have to say in the context of the problems that you're trying to solve, and are trying to solve exactly the problems that they've highlighted to us.
So the nine and tens are the ideal customer persona that you want to market and build, like you have already built for them, so you know how to market and sell to them now. And 0 to 6 is the ones who you want to build for in order to get them to the 9 and 10, so you know how to market to them.
I mean, it's basic math, right? So if you solve the problem of an NPS detractor, so these are the ones who give you a 0 to 6, then they're bound to either not become a detractor, or they will become either a neutral or promoter, right? There are no other options in that equation. And what we found is that if your NPS gives you a majority of promoters, then there's a much higher likelihood that they will actually promote your product to their friends.
How do you deal with the Estonians who are giving 7s and 8s?
Oh, that's a very good question. It is what we've learned over time is that it is sort of there's a cultural adjustment that you need to take into account, which is why I also said that the score itself is actually meaningless. Estonians are going to give you a 7 and an 8, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they hate your product. The Brazilians are going to give you a 10, and they're going to give you a lot of like feedback that didn't work with the product, right? So you have to kind of adjust it accordingly. But it's the trend itself that matters, not the score and the absolute score. And it is the comments that are the golden bit. How do you use the actual qualitative feedback that your customers give to make better decisions?
Let's move on to learning new, we talked a little bit about learning new skills as a PM, and um, doing self-reflection and understanding where you're lacking. But have you recently learned any new skills which related to product management or not, that gave you an insight of learning new things?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important that no matter how much how old you are, or how long you've done something like product management, that you put yourself in the shoes of a beginner. And I did that quite recently. So when COVID started, before COVID, I was very much into landscape photography. I love spending my time in national parks all over the world, taking pictures of sunrises in the mountains and canyons. And all of a sudden, COVID hits and you can't go anywhere. And I love Estonian nature, but it's pretty flat and pretty dull, like most of the time compared to Glacier National Park, right? And so I thought, okay, if I cannot take a picture, I'm going to try to learn how to make a picture. And I'm a pretty analytical learner, right? So I don't believe in talent. I believe in the time and effort that you put in to learn a skill. And I surfed around a little bit, and I found this website called drawbox.com. It's completely free, and what it does is it teaches you the foundations of how do you draw. And their essence, what they teach you is like, how do you turn something that exists in a 3D space, and how do you represent it on a flat piece of paper, which is a 2D space, right? So it's sort of a pretty technical approach to learning how to draw. And one of the exercises that you then have to go through is like, you have to draw 250 boxes, one at a time, just rotating them on a piece of paper one way or another way, and so on and so forth. But from there, I started to realize, well, hang on, it's actually not that hard. There's nothing. At first, I thought, oh, drawing is a talent, and many people who started to learn how to draw like when they were 2, like they're the best in the world. But then I realized, no, it's not. Like in my 30s, I can learn how to draw, and not only did I started to pick up drawing quite seriously, I started to learn how to do figure drawing. I learned human anatomy. I started learning, how to draw humans in various shapes and forms, how to draw a human from life. And currently, for example, I can show you some examples in a second, but there's a challenge called Inktober 2024, where every day for an entire month you have to draw an image based on a prompt in ink. But so what I learned there is a few things. Number one, like I continue to not believe in talent. It's purely a skill. You just have to systematically put in the time to pick up the skill. It's purely an exercise, a set of exercises that you go through. That's number one. Number two, I've spent a bit of time like learning new skills over the years, from dancing to playing the guitar to learning how to draw to taking photographs of landscapes, etc. And what's cool is that you, behind each of these skills that you learn, it doesn't come down to the flashy effects that you can put forward. The best ones still come down to the foundations of that one particular area. In guitar playing, it comes down to learning the chords and the scales and being very comfortable so that it becomes second nature to you. When you draw, it comes down to the ability to draw um, circles and boxes and cones and turn and rotate them in 3D space on a 2D plane, right? No matter how awesome of a thing you're trying to draw. And I think in product management is the same. Like you can build the flashiest product, you can build it at a global scale, you can do something incredibly complex with hundreds of engineers, with thousands of people. Actually, each of the decisions still comes down to the fundamental principles of like, what do you have, what do you want to achieve, how do you work your way backwards to achieve it, and is it ultimately solving the customer problem, right? So the foundations of no matter what skill you pick up are the most important bit. And learning a new skill other than product management on the side like helps you remember that it is about the foundations, and always will be.
I recently started. I asked from. Uh, uh, I wanted for my birthday a ukulele. I never played an instrument whatsoever, and I've started picking it up. At first, it sounded terrible, but now I I can comfortably take, I don't know, 6 to 10 chords, and it starts to sound like music. And for some reason now I can also sing along with it, and my singing's even better with it. So although I don't sing well a lot of karaoke nights, but um, uh, but yeah, that it learning the new skills is something which, getting to the basics and then starting to apply it, um, I really see the strength in, for PMs to actually, we have the three elements of or like the how to say, so you have the design, you have the business, and you have the uh, technical solution, right? um, and to learn actually yourself in either design or business or technical part and upskill the basics, I think it fundamentally helps to talk with the people you're working with, who either are the designers or are responsible more for the business part, or understanding how the solution works. So it's been really good. And now, as I'm pushing my own thing, trying to solo found and be the seven, do the seven things, it's um, fun to know a little bit how to do the designs in Figma, how to code a little bit. So I truly suggest learn new skills because it helps.
Absolutely. And not only is it like a fun thing to do, it's actually absolutely essential for PMs. Because let's play through for a moment what happens if you don't do that. You get stuck in your ways of working. You you start to rely on your ancient experience, and you start to use your longevity as an argument to make decisions, which is absolutely horrifying if your arguments are no longer relevant because the customers have changed. Um, and and as a result of this, you're going to start making decisions which are sort of caressing your ego rather than solving the customer problems. But by constantly keeping yourself fresh, you're also you start to remember that when you're making product decisions or helping your teams make product decisions, because the assumptions that were true when you made your decisions in that same field 5 years, 10 years ago may have changed. And you need to have the humility to um, consider that you were wrong, or you are now wrong, even if in the past you weren't. And that humility can come from learning a new skill where you're constantly faced with the fact that you realize that you're not that good at it, right? But over time, you realize you're going to get better at it, and and that effect is quite hard to replicate, and to remember if you're constantly sort of met with success as you just spend more time in a career. So feeling humble and feeling like you don't know something and you need to relearn it, even in an area that you think you know, is vitally important for you to make better decisions, to earn the trust of your team, and to build the best product for your customers.
I have a gut feeling that actually product managers who are coming from um, a specific discipline, whether they were engineers before or whether they were designers before or they come from the business background, they will be very much biased on the knowledge that they have if they don't learn the other disciplines, at least to some basic and or even intermediate level. And the solution or what will be built will be very much biased to either it's over engineering or over designing or putting too much contracts. If you were a lawyer in your previous life, well, everything will be covered with contracts, I'm sure of it.
Yes, well, it's kind of the same story with the frameworks, right? And I'm not necessarily vouching for the fact that everyone needs to be equally good at the same things, right? But you like I'm, for example, I consider myself in the front end to back end spectrum more of a back end PM rather than a customer facing PM. However, you need to be good enough in order to recognize that you're not good enough. And you need to then recognize who is that person who is better than you, who can complement you on those in those areas. But you need to also be good enough for you to challenge them and their decisions, and vice versa. A front end PM needs to be good enough in analytics and backend in order to challenge the sort of backend PM on their decisions, right? So in other words, like you can't. It's not practical for you to be the best at everything, right? Albeit like trying to learn a few bits and bobs here and there, like it's quite awesome. But you have to be sufficiently knowledgeable and sufficiently uh, sort of experienced in all of these areas in order for you to build a team that can collectively cover those areas. Otherwise, as you said, like you're going to have a product that's full of legal text, or you're going to have a product that is UI only and doesn't scale in the back end, or you have a perfectly beautiful machine that just looks horrifying on the front end and it's not thought about experience at all. So you have to know enough in each of the disciplines to recognize what good enough looks like for someone else to really take it to excellence.
Going here from becoming a PM at Wise, I understand that you have, is it called Product Academy? That you're starting to run with associate PMs, and it's the second season to be starting next year. Talk
Yes,
a little
that's
bit
right.
about that.
Yeah, so earlier this year we had the first season, if you will, of Product Academy, where we took in a handful of people who have never been PMs, but who had the foundations to become a very good PM. So they might have been an engineer, for example, in the past, and they now want to transition into product. It's a 10-week program, and in that time period, they are employees of Wise. They get exposed to various parts of building the product. They get exposed to the best product people at Wise, who will give them assignments, who will teach them about the domain of Wise, about how to be a good PM, and they get to put their work into practice. And the people who then graduate the Product Academy actually do become full-time employees of Wise. They get embedded in a team. And uh, one of the graduates of the Product Academy, for example, ended up in my team after they graduated. And I can tell you, I'm incredibly happy to see this talent come through. Because if you think about it, like Estonia is a pretty small community to begin with. The product community is incredibly small too. And at some point, like if you want to grow the team, it is very easy for you to get into the mindset of like, oh, I'm just going to go and hire the seasoned PMs in the country. There aren't that many of us, right? So we need, in order for us to even have a pool of seasoned PMs to hire from, large companies like Wise especially need to invest in creating that next generation of seasoned PMs. And so we have committed to invest our time into growing that next generation of PMs, starting from scratch, starting with the people who have the right foundations, who do have a STEM background, who are able to solve these problems from the first principles, and whom we can then shape and grow into the best PMs in the world. And my experience with the Product Academy graduates has been so positive that indeed we are launching a second season of Product Academy. One of my teams is going to be part of it too. So one of the candidates of Product Academy is going to end up with one of my teams. So and we're doing it in multiple locations. So we're doing it in Tallinn as well as in Budapest, Hungary, to grow the community of PMs that we have in the offices where we have lots and lots of engineers who are building Wise.
This is a little bit like God's work. If you're cultivating the new PMs who have never had the possibility to be PMs, we've already seen quite a lot of spin-offs from happening from Wise, product people going and starting their own companies and own startups, which actually boosts the ecosystem even more. So it's really cool that you're starting to raise the PMs from the um, so to say the seedling level of PM, not trying to. Of course, you can hire all around the globe the best PMs. That's not the problem, but finding the people here who want to learn the discipline and move. That's humbling to see.
Well, um, even Wise is a result of previous startups having been successful and having grown the necessary talent. So it is not only a privilege but also to some extent our duty to invest in the next generation.
How do you differ the onboarding of senior PMs? As the associate PMs through the bootcamp or a product academy. I think bootcamp is the name of your engineering uh, academy. How does it differ for senior PMs, directors, group PMs, leads?
So for senior folks, it's a little bit different in the sense that we already make the assumption that they have the foundational skills. So we expect them to be able to go and make decisions independently. We wouldn't handhold them as much. We wouldn't train them on the foundations. However, what is worth noting is that every PM, no matter what level we hire them at, is expected to start their journey as an individual contributor. They have to go and work with the engineers directly. They have to go and build features directly. They may lead a group of 30 PMs if they will. Every PM needs to have the ability to go hands-on. And the reason is like it's incredibly difficult for you to give meaningful advice, meaningful counsel, meaningful challenge if they do not know what it feels like to actually go and um, uh, build in our own stack to face the challenges that we have, um, to deal with the scale that we have, etc. Right? Um, and the one of the essences of Wise is that the solutions oftentimes are not grand, big splash things that we go and build, but it's instead a series of incremental, tiny changes. Literally thousands of them. We today make more than 5,500 code releases every month, and so as a even as a product lead coming in, you have to understand how that entire context works in order for you to meaningfully help unblock not just product managers, but also your analytics leads, your commercial leads. We have the banking team for this, your operational leads, etc. And so as such, we don't expect product leads to be hands-on day to day. We expect product leads to be able to go hands-on, and they start by being hands-on no matter at what level they get hired. So in that sense, it differs. Whereas for Product Academy, we do start with the absolute foundations of like what is who's a customer, what is NPS, what is build, measure, learn, who's this engineer that we're working with, how do you measure success, and so on.
So in essence, it's how to walk the walk and talk the talk is learned in the Prague Academy, but the senior PMs are expected to already know that, and they should show in the first 4 months how to actually do it.
Absolutely. In the first 3 or 4 months, senior PMs are effectively assessed on their ability to build product. Because who is a lead if not someone who knows how to do the job and then figures out how to scale it, right? If you're a lead and you don't know how that job works, why do you exist there? Like, yeah, the person who's actually knowledgeable how to do the job is more useful and valuable.
When you're hiring to senior PMs, one thing which I've understood, as I have many friends from Wise, is that everything is changing at so rapid pace that if you are away for 1 year, um, you miss out on so many new updates, and then you come back and it's like a new company. How the senior PMs come to learn everything that Wise is and this is doing, because the amount of information is extreme, what they have to understand, especially if they're leading, I don't know, 5 6 PMs who are already I don't know, solving anti-money laundering. How do they come to learn everything in fast pace?
It's impossible to learn everything, right? And it doesn't matter really whether you're coming in as a newbie or whether you've been in the company for a decade. Um, the pace at which we grow and the amount of knowledge and information that is accumulated in that far exceeds a single human's ability to pick up everything, right? Um, the key is to go back to the fundamental principles. Remember, we talked about what you have, what you need, and how you're going to get there. What you have in a math problem is often given to you. Like you have these three sort of things. You have maybe the length of this, you did the area of that, and then you kind of figure out the volume of the third thing. At Wise, the information that is given to you is inconceivable by a single human being. So you need to. This is why you need to have had uh, gone through the experience of solving thousands and thousands of these math problems to understand what is actually relevant for you to have in order to solve what you need to solve, right? So the focus on a single problem is important, and that oftentimes is given when you start. So you don't get to a position where you're like go and solve all the world's problems. No, you get to start focusing on some area, right? So the target is more or less given. But then what do you actually need in order to solve that problem? This is where the experience becomes super important because you can't consume everything. You have to know roughly what it is that you need. So you go and ask for this, this, and that because you have solved something similar before and you think this might be the right bit. And you're going to get A. For B, you need to negotiate. C, we don't have, but can you replace it with D? And so you're going to pick these up. And then later on, you're going to try to figure out, okay, what's the shortest path and how you're going to go and execute. And ultimately, as you get closer to the result, you're going to realize, okay, this worked, this didn't work. And doing it at scale with 5 or 6 teams is then the way how a product lead has impact. It is not possible for you to know everything, but it is also not necessary for you to know everything. It is important for you to understand what is like required for you to know in order to solve a particular problem. And this is why, like, just having a domain expertise kind of means that you know the entire thing, right? And then you can kind of navigate with it. Using a couple of frameworks is like going into a dark room and then having 3 flashlights like at random places, and you rely on the bits that you get from there in order to solve it. Going to the fundamentals allows you to kind of work your way backwards already from the target to understand what is it that you roughly need and what the rough path looks like, and you start kind of iterating around this. So it almost becomes like carving a sculpture by starting with the big faces first, and then you go into the noses and the ears, and then you get to the eyelashes and something very, very detailed, right? So you start with the big things first, and then you go and see, okay, is it more or less right, and then you go into the detail. So hopefully that answers your question. Like a seasoned PM is able to start with the big chunks and work their way backwards into the things that they need. Someone who's doing it for the first time may get overwhelmed, may get stuck, may need to know everything in order to make a decision. Whereas in practice, it's inconceivable, and you really don't need to. You just need to be mindful of what's actually going to be valuable.
So in essence, what you're looking for in the senior PMs is for them to be capable of going to the fundamentals and working their way back, as we discussed before, not in the knowledge specific domain, not in the knowing how to name 10 frameworks and how to use them, but what is the problem, what resources do we have, and how do we get from working our way back from B to A.
Yeah, exactly. And the cool thing is, like, many have asked me, like, okay, so how do I become a PM? Like, what education do I need, etc. I don't know. Like, we've had people who were civil engineers. We've had people who were building cars. We have people who are software engineers. We have people who have never been an engineer, right? And the common denominator is that you can give them the same ingredients. They're all going to make a different meal, but each of these meals is going to be delicious.
That's a nice way to wrap up this. So we talked a little bit today about who you are, what do you do, how has the past 30 years been at Wise, how mathematics has actually changed the way you think, and how does it play a role in the product management, learning new skills. I really hope that people take up more new skills rather than trying to only go in their own profession. And
I actually need to.
Yeah.
I need to show you some of my drawings.
Yes,
I never held
drawings.
up to my promise. So
if you can scan them in, and we can put them in the.
Well, I don't know if it's audio only, but you can see like a little bit of some of the.
That's really
some of this
good.
Year's Inktober stuff over here. And I'll show you the latest one as well.
How long have you drawn?
There we go.
Are you sure you're not? Are you sure you're not printing them there?
I'm pretty sure. Check out the thickness of the sketchbook. Right, it's not going to fit into any printer. Yeah, since COVID started, 2020.
If you can take a picture, it would be really cool to put it with the post and have it as learn new skills, and great things will come along your way.
Yeah, I can send it to you easily. Like, I have them. I actually take a picture of them every day, because one of the things with Inktober is that you have to post them. So I'll share them with you. The pictures are already taken. But yes, it's such a fun thing to learn new skills and use the principles of learning every day.
As a last thing, what is the one thing that you would suggest to new PMs starting out? Because this has been one of the main questions that has come up in the questionnaires that we have sent out with Tallinn Product Group. How do you become a PM?
Don't get fixated on the title, the career, the job. This is all like just a form, and it differs from company to company. Focus on getting curious about a problem and trying to solve it. I'll give an example from my recent world. I had around our house, we have a number of security cameras, but the box to which all the footage goes to is in the basement, and it is not connected to anything. There was a monitor and a mouse, and the monitor broke down. So I asked our neighbors, like, do we buy a new monitor? Or I thought, wait a minute, we have a Raspberry Pi that is connected to the internet in the same basement because it's reading our electricity meters. So I thought, can I figure out how to connect the Raspberry Pi to that security camera footage machine and then access it remotely so we could look at the footage remotely? And so the problem was very clearly defined. Now, how do you figure out what the solution is? So logically, you just pull a cable there. And so I went and bought a cable and pulled it there. And the rest of it was like, okay, I need to go from my machine over the internet to the Raspberry Pi. How do I do that securely? How do I do that over a VPN? And then I need to figure out, okay, how do I get from the Raspberry Pi to the machine? And then I need to figure out how within that machine I get access to the footage. And one step at a time, I figured it out, and it took me about 2 days to solve it. And actually, as a result of this, we managed to get footage of a cargo bike thief that we pulled. We shared with victims who shared it with the police onwards. And they actually, I don't know if they caught the thief, but they actually got the bike back. And our footage played a tiny contribution in this. And so, was this building product? I would say absolutely yes. Why? Because it uses the same principles. Has nothing to do with the title. Has nothing to do with the career. So don't get fixated on the form of building product. Try to get curious about actually solving real world problems that others would benefit from. That's what product is, and the better you get at that, the more chances you have at becoming the best PM in the world.
That's a beautiful thing to end on. Thank you, Lars.
Thanks for having me.
I really hope that you enjoyed today's show, and please like and share and subscribe to our podcast and Substack at tpg.ee. Thanks, and see you soon.